Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. I'm one of your two hosts, Noor Kyle.
And I'm the one of your two hosts that is not Noor Kyle. I'm Mushtaq Ali.
Yes, and thank you so much for joining us, whether you're here live. Got a lot of cool people tonight. You must have been really interested in this topic or something, but we are so excited to have you. And those of you who are watching on the replay, we welcome you as well. Thank you for joining us all. So, do we have any announcements? Well, I guess the number one thing to keep announcing is that we are still accepting registrations for our retreat. We have we filled up a bunch of spots at this point, but we still have spots open, and we would love to have you either inquire if you have questions about that. All the details are below in the description. We have a link that is going to direct you to kind of an overview of all the stuff having to do with the retreat. Where it is, we're going to be in Sweden in May. I think mid-May, early to mid-May.
Yeah, mid-May.
Yeah, and Mushtaq and I will be there along with some of you who are joining us this evening, and still more to come, I am sure. And registration is going to be open until, so far we're thinking March 12th, so we have a bit over a month now for people to keep signing up, and we do still have room for you. So if you want to join us, please don't hesitate to just get in touch with us if there's stuff that you'd like to know that you don't know yet and that we haven't answered on our landing page below. But we look forward to more people joining us for sure. And what else? Well, I guess I have started writing recently. I'm going to be doing kind of a Substack where I take questions from people or just cover topics that are of interest to me personally as a Sufi teacher, as someone who's a practicing dervish, all of that stuff. So instead of doing the short videos that I had started last year, I think this is going to be an outlet that is really fun for me and hopefully engaging for you all. So we'll have a link to that in the description below as well. Anything else?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, if you're watching us on YouTube, welcome. We would really love it if you would like our video.
Oh yes, the
Click
spiel.
that little
Yes.
like button. It's very important because our most loyal follower, the person who we can count on to watch every video, is some guy who comes in to hate on them. So the more likes we get, it can balance out the hate that he gives us. And
Little that it
what the
is.
heck?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually very funny, but it warms the cockles of my heart to know that we have this guy trapped into watching all of our videos just so that he can hate them. Um,
It's a
but
hobby.
also, yeah, also subscribe. Subscribe to our videos, subscribe to our channel. We would love it if you did that.
Yeah,
And
and
make a comment. We love your comments. We try and answer all of them. And if we don't answer them, at least we will think about answering them, which is more than can be said for some channels.
yes. And same thing goes for my Substack. If you enjoy it, think about subscribing, think about leaving a comment. I definitely would appreciate that a lot. So thanks.
Yeah. So
All right.
there we have it. So what the heck are we talking about tonight?
Yeah, thanks for hanging with us there. We are going to be talking about something that seems to be of interest to a number of you, and that is kind of a consideration of the relationship between Sufism, the Gurdjieff work, and the way or path of blame, as it is called in English. And what is that word in Arabic or in Turkish?
Malamatiyya,
Yeah.
the
So
blameworthy peoples.
that's what we're going to be talking about this evening. So where should we get started, Mushtaq? I feel like we're going to notice some similarities in the culture of this space, the nine-sided circle, to this description of the path of blame.
Yeah. Well, the path of blame is actually fairly nebulous. And depending on who's talking, that phrase can mean totally different things.
Definitely. Yeah.
Some people will say Oh, it's a form of Sufism, and there are people who say they belong to.
David's
David.
struggling. That's okay.
David is struggling. Take care of that for me. I love bossing you around like that.
I'll deal with the people
Yeah.
coming in and out. Don't worry about that.
So some people say they are members of the Malamati dervishes. They are an actual order with sheikhs and all of this kind of stuff. Other people will say that they are Malamatis, but they are not Sufis. They are a parallel track of spiritual development. And you have all sorts of variations between those. Some people say the Malamatis are all heretics and terrible and no good and very bad. And some people will say they are the wisest of the wise.
We're at the top of the spiritual hierarchy.
Yeah, Ibn al-Arabi suggested that. He suggested that the blameworthy ones were at the top of the hidden hierarchy. I'm pretty sure that dogs are at the top of the hidden hierarchy myself, because dogs are nicer than human. Yes, exactly right. Thank you, Levita.
Cute little chihuahua.
Yeah. So, yes, dogs are nicer than people, as a rule. So, what is this blameworthy thing? We have a completely different view from everybody else, by the way. It's a big surprise there. We say that the idea of being blameworthy is a specific body of practices that can be incorporated into your work. And this is true whether you're a Sufi or not. But so let me give you an example. There was a great dervish. His name was Bayezid Bastami. And at one time, he traveled from where he was living to another city. And he arrived at Ramadan. And everybody came around him to hang out with him because he's a great dervish, and they all want to get the good stuff on them. And so he sits down and he pulls out a loaf of bread and starts eating it. And everybody starts freaking out because it's Ramadan and he should be fasting, and they all run away from him. And not a single one of them stopped to think that according to Islamic law, if you are traveling, you are actually required not to fast. You're not supposed to fast while traveling, and traveling is a very specific thing. And he was traveling. So he became blameworthy in the eyes of these people, even though he was following Islamic law to its letter, to the dot over the letter. And that is one example of being blameworthy. It is to act in such a way that ignorant people will make assumptions that are not true and hopefully wake up from those assumptions. But that's an external aspect, and that's for the big guys. For all of us small guys, it's a little bit different. We don't go around trying to act in weird ways to freak people out, like the so-called crazy wisdom teachers. You all know what crazy wisdom is? That is how would I say it? A license to be an asshole as a spiritual teacher, more often than not. It's like you're going to go, oh, I have crazy wisdom, so I'm going to leap out and do all of this stupid stuff and rattle you up because I am crushing your ego for you, or whatever excuse they have. And I have met exactly one teacher who really was a crazy wisdom teacher. And he was incredibly nice. He wasn't mean to anybody, as far as I could tell, in any of the time I ever spent with him.
So what made him like a crazy wisdom teacher?
He had a wild way of looking at things. He had a way of looking at things like Bastami did, where he can see the absurdity of people's behavior, and he would act in such a way that maybe they would see it, maybe they wouldn't, but they wouldn't do yelling at you or
Hitting you
God,
or
yeah, what's the term? Tough love. They wouldn't do this tough love thing because what usually translates as tough love is just being a bully, in my own humble opinion. I've seen very few people who can actually do real tough love because it requires that you be tough on yourself first.
so that goes beyond just like pointing something out that somebody might not like to,
Yeah,
legit abusive tendencies. And that's not crazy wisdom. I mean, this thing that
no,
gets mistaken for crazy wisdom.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So what we're talking about with the blameworthy ones is not this. The secret, and blame is a terrible word for this in English. It has a different connotation in Arabic. Um, but in English, another way to say this would be looking at yourself in such a way that you never give your ego a break, that you are ruthlessly honest with yourself about what your ego wants. So, people who follow this path, for instance, make themselves obscure. They don't wear groovy Sufi clothes. They don't go by titles. Nobody is kissing anybody's ring. They're just regular folks, and they work hard to self-observe to the point where they catch every single attempt of the ego to exalt itself, and then you just kind of push it back down. In certain ways, I think that everybody who presumes to be a teacher should be on the path of blame, because otherwise you're going to start believing your own press at some point. And this is a method of not believing your own press, of looking at your internal states and telling yourself the truth about them, going, yeah, I want people to like me. So I want people to think I'm special. So I'm going to wear this big silly hat, right? I want people to think I'm special. So I'm going to dress in this particular manner that shows that I am a great Sufi. You all know what I'm talking about, right? Everybody's seen people like this, whether they're Sufis or whatever flavor of whatever they are. We say you can tell the really spiritual people in the Sufi group by how big their turbans are, right? And you start getting bigger and bigger and bigger turbans until the turban is so big that you can't hold your head up anymore. And then you have to have followers to hold your turban up for you as you walk around. Now, we don't care about that guy. What we care about is not becoming that guy. Does that make sense? Now, there are entire histories of the Malamatiyya tradition, and it is related to the tradition that we teach from. Though it's not the same if you're going out and you're going to study with a Malamati teacher. They aren't us, but we could say that they're second cousins. But we hold some of their practices to be essential to the path. Now, I mentioned Gurdjieff because he is an example of somebody who probably had some of these teachings, have been exposed to some of these teachings. I would not say that he was initiated into any Malamati tradition, but he had certainly had some exposure to it, which was why he was a rascal guru. He did things that were designed to jar you and shake you out of your trance and stuff like that, that were sometimes a little violent.
Do you think he kind of pushed the crazy wisdom line a bit?
I think so, just a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he was, as far as I can tell, utterly ruthless with himself about all of this. So there is that. It shows in some of his teachings, in the teaching of self-observation. That is, I mean, the Malamatis have been doing self-observation since there have been Malamatis.
Mm-hmm.
That would be an essential step in their path, is to guard your thoughts and your actions, and make sure that your ego never gets to drive the car. And the most important part of that is nothing external, but the most inward look. Because I could come across as the most humble, self-effacing person in the world, but inside I could be going, look how cool I am. That little voice, a voice so tiny that you almost can't hear it. And it would be praising you for being so cool. That is what the path of blame looks for. It looks for that little bit that acts as a kind of yeast to the bread of your soul, but not one that will leaven it properly, one that will putrefy it.
Yeah, so I liked that this can be framed as kind of a healthy self-criticism rather
Yes.
than, when we think of blame, sometimes we think of misplaced accusations or kind of creating a personality out of guilt can sometimes be a
Yeah, and
path
this
that
is
people
not that.
take. Yeah,
But
this is not
that's
that.
one that gets mistaken for it. This is not, what the Catholics say, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. I'm
Yeah,
so guilty. I am so guilty. I am completely guilty. This is not that. That's not the path of blame. Because that in itself,
that's a trap in and of itself.
yeah, it's just, that joke about the rabbi, the priest, and the minister who were all sitting in a church somewhere. Each one of them gets up and he makes a prayer about how humble and everything he is. And then this old ragged bum comes in and starts making a prayer himself and saying, "Oh my Lord, I am nothing before you. Please have mercy upon me." And the one guy nudges the other and says, "Look who thinks he's nobody." And we want to avoid that, because there is a huge amount of egotism in thinking that you are spiritually refined. Thoughts, questions so far?
Levita. Oh, and after that, I'll read what James has to say. So, yeah, Levita.
What you just said, Miss Tuck, reminds me of that old saying, if you think you're enlightened, go home and deal with your family.
Yeah.
If you think you're enlightened, go home and deal with your family, said Levita.
Yep.
You're a little quiet, but I did hear, yeah. And I think that's something that can be a really helpful reminder of, you know, how far we may have come in our work on ourselves, and also how freaking far we have to go when we encounter those situations where all the old stuff gets dragged up that either takes us by surprise or gives us that sense of, ugh, this again. It's still there. It is likely still there. Yeah. Thanks, Levita. And James says, is the path of blame that to...
That of realistic
Oh, thank you.
observation of the
Yeah.
ego.
Sorry about my spelling.
No, that's okay. My
okay.
vision sucks. So
Yeah, and I spell worse than you do, so this is easy for me to read.
all right. Yeah. So would you like to ask out loud now that you're here?
Yeah, well, I just wondered, just one thing I've struggled with is to realistically assess myself without a dramatic display of guilt. There's not just dramatic display of guilt to others, oh, I'm so humble, look at my guilt, but to myself, some kind of reflexive drama, to make a new drama out of what should just be an objective observation of, okay, here's this tendency, this is what it does, this is what it's probably based in.
Yeah,
Is
and
that
you're absolutely correct.
right?
There is no guilt in the path of blame. If you're going around feeling guilty, tearing your shirt, beating yourself with sticks, whatever, that's the wrong thing. Instead of guilt, you develop humility. Humility is the quality of realizing that you are just folks, that there is nothing particularly special about you, either good or bad. You're just here. You're just you. And letting go of all of the things that would exalt you from being just you.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you're feeling guilty, you're doing it wrong, and you should blame yourself for that.
Yep.
Sometimes I conceptualize it for myself as the difference between, oops, I'll do better next time, and wow, I really fucked up, I'm a terrible person. And
Yeah.
one of them allows you to think about moving forward, what's next, and not getting stuck in the story of the moment, whereas the other is very, it kind of harkens back to all of the, not just the past, but all of the stories we have about the past as well. And that's why I think it's kind of nice to just have those phrases that anchor us in a sense of being able to move forward, as opposed to the burden of oh no, here we go again, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Yes, that's an excellent distinction. Thank you.
That's why we keep her around, because she's smarter than me.
Lived experience, my friends. All right. Anybody else, though? Thanks, James. I think that was such a good thing for all of us to talk about in this conversation, is that sense of, you know, whether guilt or whatever comes into this. And
guilt does not come into this.
Exactly.
And shame does not come into this. If you're experiencing guilt or shame when examining your worst possible screw ups in life, then you are trapped in your ego. Now, this doesn't mean that it lets you off the hook for doing dumb shit.
I think that's also an important point.
It's very important. If you do dumb shit, you've done dumb shit. And you need to see that and see where you have gone, oh, I fell short here. I did not live up to my standards. And that gives you another part.
Yeah.
Yeah. that gives you another part of what the path of blame is the path of blame is the path of conscience.
Hold that thought. I want to
Yeah.
check in with Levita, who has her hand up.
Yes.
Levita.
So if, let's see if I get this right. So if you hear that inner voice and it's hypercritical and self-flagellating, that's your ego.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then our struggle is to not start self-flagellating over the self-flagellating, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not trying to overthink it. I just
Yeah,
was
but
realizing-
I
That's
know
okay.
that
We'll
people
overthink
will.
it for you.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because sometimes it's like, okay, yeah, like you say, I did this dumb thing. Okay, don't do that again. Do better. And then sometimes it's like that spiral into
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we don't want the spiral. The spiral serves us not at all. We need to understand through true conscience that we may have screwed up. We may have accidentally hurt somebody. We may or may not have to make amends for that in some way or another. But it is different than agonizing over your mistake and living there. So you have to own any shortcoming that you have and embrace it, because that's part of the path of blame, embracing your shortcomings, while at the same time not crushing yourself over them or letting anybody else crush you over them.
I think
This
that's
is
an
one of the
important point, too.
danger of hanging out with the crazy wisdom people, is that they will go, oh, here, let me crush your ego over that. It'll be good for you. No, really, it will be.
No, that just breaks spirits, and that's
Yeah,
not what we want.
and that's not the point.
So we hold on to that nugget about conscience, but I want to touch in on JD's chat thing. Okay, so Jefferson says, is there any risk of or caution involved with the way of blame being decoupled or free of a personal relationship with God? In what is this ego as in, what is this ego temperance mediated by without a relationship with surrender to that which is greater than myself?
Well, as Sufi types, we would say that this is all about that connection with the one, that connection with the divine reality, that connection with God, for lack of a better term. I don't like the Germanic word for it because it's so misused. But then, what you're going to do, that's our language. So yeah, in order, the point of this is to remove the egoic impediments to a complete connection with the one reality. And every chunk of ego that you retain is in your way. So yes, there is a danger without a sense of your own internal connection with the divine, that this is going to take you off in a weird direction. And at the same time, you have to give up the egoic part of yourself that says, God tells me what to do. It's okay for me to do this. It's a two-edged sword. So, yes, you must have a direct connection to the divine oneness without intermediary. And at the same time, you need a way to check yourself so that your ego doesn't step in and go, oh, God thinks I'm fine. And God does think you're fine. But God can also think you're an asshole. It's one of those weird paradoxes that if you're the divine oneness, you can get away with. Does that make any kind of sense at all, Jefferson? And you can talk to us if you want.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I mean, I'm also asking the question from a place of having been on a path in the past that had a lot of self-scrutiny as a vehicle. But yeah, so I loved the answer. I loved being on the paradoxical reply too, because I think that's really important too, to not become the one who wears the robes,
Yes.
so to speak. Even if you're
Yeah.
alone in a room.
Yeah,
That's a great
especially
point.
if you're alone in a room,
Yeah.
man. That's what really gets you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
I am reminded of the the recitation of Allahu Akbar, which is, God is greater. And often that's used in very dramatic ways where we see scenes of terrorism and all that stuff. But at the core, I mean, what that is really saying is that whatever stuff we think is really bad or really great about whatever we're doing, there's always a higher power beyond that is kind of the big picture that covers everything. And whether we're in a circumstance where we think we're doing really awesomely or really terribly, it helps us to stay connected to that bigger picture, to remind ourselves that God is greater than whatever not only we may imagine God to be, but it's it, she, they, him, her, whatever it is really the focus point for everything that we do on a path like this, as opposed to trying to be blameless or be good or be really spiritual or whatever it might be. We're never going to top that. We're never going to do better than God at those things. So we may as well just chill out and do our best to being human. What do you think, Mushtaq?
I think I'm just answering a question from David, who keeps getting kicked off the internet.
Oh no, poor
Yeah.
David.
I don't know
Yeah.
if he can get back on, but I told him to keep trying if he wants. It won't bother us if he does.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, where were we?
We were talking about previously. We were talking about conscience and how that
Yes.
ties into this.
Yeah, so we have said over and over again that conscience is experiencing both the other and yourself as inwardness. And David just says, I think I'll catch it on the replay. Third time's the message.
True.
Yeah.
We'll be thinking of him.
Sad. We were thinking of you, David. So, what does it mean to experience the other as an inwardness? Anybody want to take a wild guess at that? Ilmar, where are you? You're so quiet. You know this stuff. Talk to us.
Oh, I don't know. I guess some questions, but anyway, experiences. I guess I think of it as Kant. Treat everyone as an end in themselves and not just as a means. Basically, is what the way I usually would translate that.
Yeah, that's a good start to it.
Levita's
What does it
unmuted.
mean when you experience yourself as an inwardness? I'm looking right at you, Ilmar.
Oh, just look at me. Okay, so I guess I should stay unmuted. But when I experience myself as inwardness, I experience myself basically as an awareness that's active in the world and in touch with a transcendent aspect. Yeah. And I guess I see others that way also. And sometimes I'm more aware of that and sometimes less aware of that. You know, that's, I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, but that would be the
That actually does answer the question quite well. Now the question is, can we understand your answer, even if it's a perfect
now that's
answer?
up to you.
Yeah.
You're the explainer.
Yes.
I'm just listening.
Thanks, Omar. And I think Levita wanted to give it a
Yeah,
shot.
Levita, tell us something.
only
Levita is
thing-
wise.
Click. The only thing I could come up with is, to answer your question, is at bare minimum, cognitive empathy. When you're talking about experiencing somebody else.
Yeah. Describe cognitive empathy for us.
Well, I know that if somebody pushed my child down, I would feel a certain way. So I think that if that person's child was pushed down, they would feel a certain way here, as opposed to actually feeling it. Like sometimes if you watch a video and somebody falls down and it looks like they're hurt and you kind of like, oh, that looks painful. And you kind of feel it even though it didn't happen. But some people can't do the feeling part, but they can recognize, yeah, that's gonna leave a mark or that's gonna hurt.
That's a good
And
start.
trying to keep in mind, even though we're the center of our own stories, that other people around us are also the center of their stories. So that where we're meeting up with other people, keeping in mind that it's not just about us. It's about them too.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, Levita. Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're right. Like that's the bare minimum, you know. I think it's important to be able to have a starting point, and for many of us that is the starting point. Especially with people we don't have a strong connection with, that would foster a more embodied sense of empathy. Yeah.
So, how did Gurdjieff help people discover their own egoic nature? I'll give you a hint. Part of it was that he made people work, physically exert themselves beyond what they were comfortable with. And he did this, and I'm not saying that this is a good thing or a bad thing. It's not the way I would do it, but I mean, other than our hairdos, Gurdjieff and I are nothing alike. He can grow a much better mustache than I can. But he would get these, I mean, his students were all upper class and oftentimes part of whatever aristocracy was around, you know, the Russian intelligentsia, the French snooty people, you know, all of these people who had certain attitudes towards life. And one of those attitudes was, I don't need to do this, you know. I am doing this thing and it makes me uncomfortable, and I should not be uncomfortable because I'm special, and things like that. And he would use work to bring these attitudes out. And then he would help people, supposedly in one form or another, observe this behavior as conditioning and to see it as the false I.
So Cindy has her hand up.
Yes, Cindy, I was waiting to hear from you. Where are you?
Hi. I found something interesting about Gurdjieff is he was a little off-putting. He would cause people to do this work, and then he'd make this fantastic meals for them and wine and dine them and treat them almost exactly the opposite way that they're being treated before. I don't know about y'all, but I would be a little like, this is a little crazy. A little bit of that crazy wisdom kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And so
that whiplash
I would
feeling.
feel
Yeah.
unsettled, right? And if
Yeah,
you're
and
gonna,
don't forget, during those meals, he would get everybody roaring drunk.
on probably good wine or bad wine, would it matter?
Yeah,
Yeah. So that would
Yeah.
make me uneasy. And if you're on edge, yeah, you might learn some stuff about yourself.
it's true.
Thanks, Cindy. So he was known for pushing people to this, at least the edge of discomfort. That's clear.
Yeah, or beyond the edge. He
Yeah,
wanted to push
that's why I
people to their
say-
breaking point.
At least, but I mean, this is why he's an interesting character, because he would push people to this extent, and that was his methodology.
Yeah. He would also push himself to that extent, which makes him different than a lot of teachers.
That is unique, because so many times we see that we have figures who, as you're implying, they push the people around them while going easier on themselves, or kind of exempting themselves from that. It's either they're blind to it, or they feel like they don't need that kind of experience, and yet everyone else does. So, yeah, I mean, he was a hard ass on just about everybody.
Yeah.
Levita.
So I'm trying to see if I understood what you said. So Gurdjieff would have people working in like doing hard work, hard labor.
Yeah.
Like building
Like you-
stuff and yard
Digging
work.
holes, moving giant boulders. Yeah. All sorts of crazy stuff.
So do you think he was having them do that to create a sense of, I can't think of the word because I don't want to use empathy again because that's not the term, but like a connection to people who have to work in those positions?
I think that he was doing that in many cases, though undoubtedly not all, but in many cases he was doing that to get at their entitlement.
So I think there's something to what you're saying, Levita,
Yeah,
in that,
that's the word I was looking for.
yeah,
Because when you were talking about that, I thought about the pandemic and how in the very beginning, everybody stayed home except for the essential workers. And I thought essential workers were like firefighters and police, but it turned out to be garbage people, grocery workers, and those people were in the most danger because they dealt with everybody as far as the virus. So it was kind of like, oh, like I thought I was really important because I just paper at this job doing this thing, but if nobody delivers my groceries, I'm going to starve to death. Like to shake up what's really important.
yep, definitely, yeah. And people in this case were, as Mushtaq said, these were, the cultural and structural elite. So they typically had people to do all this stuff for them, and they could just be like, oh, that's too hard. I'm too good for that, or I should be doing different things.
Yeah. Remember a very famous snooty upper class Englishman said, living is best done through one's servants.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Where are my servants at?
Oh man, yeah.
They were not issued to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of person would never show up here.
Oh.
So
No, I think they offed him during the French Revolution.
Ouch. Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
pretty that was a bottleneck of sorts, yes.
At which end of the guillotine?
What
Yeah,
was
but
that,
that was
Omar?
just the
I
thing
say,
about
at
the
which
French.
end of the guillotine did they join the French Revolution?
Yeah, the thing about the French Revolution is that they were throwing out the upper classes so they themselves could become the upper classes.
It's like this.
Oops, sorry. Sorry, Levita. I am.
And Jem has made a comment here.
And Cindy has her hand up as well.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry, Levita. I didn't mean to cut you off. There was a lot of staticky sound, so I was just trying to quiet that. Cindy.
So the movement classes, if there's anything that would really, I'd be busted in, is some of those movement classes that Gurdjieff had. Moving so unnaturally, half of your body had to move to a certain beat, and the other half of your body or something had to move another way. Wow, what would that do to people who were coordinated like me? I would be like, which left? I think that was very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's an entire topic in itself. But my question to start is, what makes you think that that's unnatural?
Have you tried it?
Yes,
Ah,
I can do that stuff very well.
fantastic. I'm great.
It's not that it's unnatural. It's just that you have never allowed your body
Tried
to
it.
move in those ways.
Not
If it
that
was
way.
unnatural, you couldn't do it. All
Interesting.
that is natural. Cherie, where are you? Where are you, Cherie?
Thank you, Mr.
There you are. Cherie, would you mind teaching everybody the finger game?
Oh, okay. All right.
Here's where you start.
Okay. Your hand, your thumb, little finger, bring them together. Now start drawing a small circle with your thumb on your little finger. Do not let your little finger move. Do it slowly. Reverse. Stop. Now ask yourself, what's doing the feeling, the thumb or the little finger? Now try this. Use your little finger to draw a circle on the tip of your thumb. Do not let the thumb move. Notice how you have to slow down even more. Do not let your thumb move a tiny bit. Stop. Reverse. Use your little finger to draw the circle in the opposite direction on the tip of your thumb. Stop. What's doing the feeling, the little finger or the thumb?
And that's just the beginning. But the thing is, what she is asking you to do there is completely natural. If it were unnatural, you would not be capable of doing it. But if you're capable of doing it, it's natural. It's just unlearned.
And that's the thing is,
Yes.
I mean, part of what was so interesting about the Gurdjieff dances was you had these people who were in their physiological ruts where they avoided certain ways of moving just as a matter of going about their
Habit.
lives. Yeah. And we do the same thing in different varying ways. Yeah, sure.
So this is one of the things that we're going to be exploring during the retreat. For anybody who's going to the retreat, we're going to be really looking at this and some of the things that you can do physically. They aren't going to be hard. Yeah, they're going to be hard, but they aren't going to be too hard.
So in stretch therapy, we talk about interrupting patterns, and what we tell people is that what your normal is not ideal. So what they perceive as normal and comfortable in doing a particular pose or stretch or movement, it's the one that's actually causing them all the pain. So we ask them to interrupt it by doing certain things, and then they go, but that doesn't feel right. I don't know what to do with my legs now that I've done a hip flexor stretch. Now, what happened to my body? You know, and they really look confounded, and it is because their normal's been interrupted. But what they're trying to achieve as an ideal is a lot more difficult than they anticipated. So often they come with a sense of, but I was told to do it like this, or I was told to do it like this. The same I find with this kind of work with Mushtaq is that some of the things that I've learned before, I have to suspend that because what I'm doing is not getting me further down the road because I'm in a rut. And so my normal needs to be interrupted. And I think that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Yep. Thanks, Sheree, for helping us out. So I want to get to Jem's comment and Jefferson, who has his hand up. All right, so Jem says, pretty smart of Gurdjieff, first physically tiring them out. So the physical is tired, and then giving them wine to tire down some of the neural networks on the mind. Tapping into the unconscious? Or am I being completely wrong about this?
No, you're not being completely wrong at all. Everything that he did was designed to break patterns. And each of these things will break certain patterns. The pattern of not knowing how to work physically is a big pattern in a lot of people. And, you know, Gurdjieff had people digging big pits and breaking giant rocks and stuff. My teacher did it through pizza. He had a pizza parlor. That's what he did for a living. And his dervishes would come to his pizza parlor and he would teach them how to work, how to make pizza, how to be attentive to what you were doing, and all of this kind of stuff. And some of it was physically challenging. I mean, kneading 25 pounds of pizza dough is physically challenging. It's great for your grip. I got to tell you, I know of nothing better for developing strong hands and forearms than kneading pizza dough. But it was an entire methodology of how to be awake through pizza. The fun thing was that if you did this, you didn't do it for free. He paid you while you were in the pizza parlor. He paid you a little salary for doing it. So that told you something too. What did that tell you? No thoughts?
That there's value in your effort.
Yes, that your work has value and that you weren't devoting yourself to the idea of selfless service to the guru, which is a good way for the guru to get his garage clean for free.
Yeah. All right, Jefferson.
Yeah, just a quick comment. That it's interesting that the word humility that was spoken about earlier is connected to humiliation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those HU words. Yeah, just in terms of this process, because I mean, sure, humiliation can be done from a tough love place, but I think humiliation can be a process to help somebody wake up, perhaps.
Yeah. humiliation is the process of developing humility. But we don't understand what the word means anymore.
Yeah.
People think humiliation is me going, Jefferson, you fool, you idiot, you terrible, no good, very bad human being. How dare you even exist, you scum, right? That's not humiliation. Humiliation is saying, Jefferson, do you see a part of yourself that is mechanical? And if so, can you observe it? And you look at it and you go, oh my God, there's this mechanical thing, and I do this, and I hate doing this. And then you finally go, oh, okay, I can let that go. That's the process of humiliation that develops humility. Other people don't do it to you. You have to do it to yourself. And it has to be done kindly. Does that make sense?
I think we did a talk on that. We can double check.
Probably.
but
We've done so many talks, I
I
lose track of them.
feel like we did a talk on humility at some point, so I'm making a note about that. Anyways, James, thank you, Jefferson.
Well, let's make sure that I answered Jefferson's question rather than just blowing smoke at him.
You did, and if I, the way that's settling me is that, if I'm on, I mean, again, this is, I'm just taking the label, the way of blame. That's description to the way of blame. That self-mediated kind humiliation is a way of blame
Right.
internally.
Yes.
Exactly right.
And it's hard to find a word that works there in English, isn't
Yeah.
it? Because humiliation, people go, oh God. Blame, people go, ah. All of
Yeah,
those
they're all very
things.
charged words.
Yeah.
And, that's what we're stuck with.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. But we do the best we can with the materials.
Instead of saying humiliation, we should say humilify. I've been humilified.
Humilitized.
Yes.
That's very 20th century, yes. Oh, thank you so much. All right. James.
Yes.
Oh, I just want to add my appreciation for the distinction just before. With a lot of so-called ego crushing and becoming abusive, for the person on the receiving end, I don't think it teaches them anything. I think it just makes them contract into an infantile position. If they've allowed themselves to be open to that because they think they need it in some way, just this crushing, just this abusiveness, just makes them contract back into an infantile place where they can't actually learn anything.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
yeah.
that heavy-handed stuff that a lot of so-called gurus, a lot of sadists, power trippers used to justify. I'm crushing your ego. I'm showing you yourself. Yeah, but you're doing it in a way that, even if it's technically accurate, it's just causing your student to convulse into a more narrow, defensive, confused position.
Right. And
It is a form of manipulation. It is a form of control.
yeah, as
Yes.
Vita says, makes you easier to control.
Yeah. So the only person who has a right to crush your ego is you. There is not a teacher on the planet who has the right or permission to crush your ego. What a teacher is supposed to do is provide you the tools and the experiences that allow you to crush your own ego. But that's not their job. Anybody who tells you different is selling you something.
Or maybe that teacher just isn't as good as they think they are in dealing with actual human beings.
That's often the case, but then they have not gone through the way of blame.
Yeah.
Because the person who needs this the most is somebody who presumes to be a teacher.
I think, it can happen that teachers make mistakes and they kind of underestimate the sensitivity of a student and try to speak a truth to a student. The student freaks out, feels like, oh my God, my teacher just yelled at me, and they do shrink. And it's unfortunate when that happens, even when it comes from a place of having the best of intentions. And that's something that we always have to be careful about.
Yeah.
It-
And that means as a teacher, you have to be awake to the feedback that you are
Yeah.
being given from your student.
And if the student walks away after that, it can be a sting to the teacher's ego in that, oh man, you know,
Yeah, I really
missed
like
the
that
mark.
person, and they have
Yeah.
wandered off for whatever reason. Yeah, as a teacher,
Yeah.
you got to learn to deal with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that can happen
So,
too.
Hind, what do you think? You've been so quiet today.
Well, yes, it just remind me the story of Yunus Emre.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing. His teacher, he was a judge, and his teacher gave him, some works to break his ego,
Yes.
like feeding the dogs and
Eating the dogs. I remember that as part of
yeah,
the story. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And one of the great teachers, Bahauddin Naqshband, when he was being trained, his teacher sent him out to take care of animals. You know, find a dog sick on the street and nurse him back to health, and tend to horses and do all of this kind of stuff.
yes, cutting the firewood and gathering the
Yeah.
firewood.
Yeah. And then the penultimate was to go out on the streets and clean up all of the filth he could find of whatever form, which for, somebody like Naqshband, he was not, some poor peasant, right? Used to doing that kind of stuff. He had to break his own ego to do it. And that was a great teaching for him, is to be able to do all of these things and to not let his ego interfere with him. So,
Yes.
and we've all done that. And, I always remember the morning that I got up and walked out of my little bungalow and found my teacher in the backyard picking up dog turds, a little plastic bag, and I'm like, oh my God, my teacher is picking up dog shit. Ah!
How can I let this happen? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm running over there going, show him, but let me do this.
Yeah.
And like, what's the big deal? He didn't think twice about it. He got a dog for his kids, and his kids were young and they weren't taking care of the dog. So he took care of business, and he didn't expect anybody else to do it. It was like nothing to him. Go out, do it. From that day, though, I made sure that I always got up earlier than him and went out and picked up the dog turds, because I just couldn't see him doing it. But that was me.
He wasn't too good for it. Yeah.
He was not too good for anything.
Yeah.
He led by example.
Yes, he absolutely led by example.
To live the work and be demonstrating by your actions is so much more powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Hind, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
also one of the things that he asked him to do is not to answer anyone. Just say, I don't know. I know nothing.
Yeah.
I know. I
That's
think that was more difficult to
Yeah.
and doing the
Especially for a big judge like him,
Yes.
he's got all of this scholarship behind him and everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
so we're talking about Islamic judges who tend to be, they have a lot of they have a lot of authority because they put time into filling their brains with all kinds of
Yeah.
academic and
Years of study.
book learning type knowledge. So they get status from that. And it is kind of seen as their duty, their responsibility, both in a practical sense and in an ego sense, to share that wisdom and knowledge with others.
And
But
power. Yunus had the power of life
yeah,
and death over the people in the town where he was the judge. If he sentenced somebody to die, they would die.
yep,
Somebody would go out and
yeah.
yeah.
So to be in a position of having to negate what you know after you've invested all this time and effort in learning all that book learning and tell people I don't
Yeah.
know. Wow.
Yeah, so Yunus was definitely on the path of blame. And that's what Taptuk Baba, his teacher, arranged for him. And it was very powerful for him. It crushed his ego. But Taptuk was never mean to him, not even once.
Yes,
He just,
that's
yeah. And the Bektashi, who that was the tariqa that Yunus was a member of, have a pretty strong connection with the Malamatiyya. So this is not surprising.
Thanks, Hen. It's nice to
Yeah.
have those stories brought into the conversation.
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
So we have seen how classical Sufis do it. And that was a really good example. We've talked a little bit about how Gurdjieff did it. We've talked about how to do it wrong. And our method here is we don't go around saying, oh, we're Malamatiyya or anything. It's just a practice with us. The practice of internal and external humility. We know we're not special. We try not to act special, and we try and catch ourselves when we're getting special. We just, like I say, no sheikhs, all dervishes, right? And that's what we want. We don't want to make ourselves better or bigger than anybody else. We want to make ourselves completely effaced in the presence of the divine unity. And you can't do that when you got a lot of baggage. So you got to unload your baggage. And the method of self-observation, of really looking at the things within you that are completely egoic, are wildly important. Yes, Hint has written down Yunus's name, so people can look him up. He is one of the finest poets ever to be born. And like Rumi was a great poet, they were kind of contemporaries, but Rumi wrote in Farsi, he wrote in Persian. Yunus wrote in Turkish, which was the language of the people. And to this day, people sing his songs, they sing his poems. You can go to, as a matter of fact, if you remind me, Noor, I will find a group of contemporary dervishes sitting on a street in Istanbul overlooking the harbor singing Ilahis of Yunus Emre, because they still do it.
Yep. I know the one you're talking about, so
Yeah.
I'll write that down. Young hippies.
Yep. Yeah, they're a good example of Malamatis, because they ain't dressed like dervishes, they don't look like dervishes, they look like hippies.
So who, I want to touch base with a couple people we haven't heard from yet.
Go for it.
Yeah, Jonathan, how are you doing?
Yeah, I find that it's not easy to discover um, parts of me that are, let's call them attitudes that diminish my life.
Mm.
And for me, it's hanging out with other people that cause me to, has a much stronger effect at allowing me to self-discover. And I don't mean like hanging out with people I'm comfortable with. It would be people I'm not comfortable with. Now, those experiences are too strong for me to actually self-observe while it's happening. I'm not that good, but afterwards, when I get home or I calm down and I'm by myself, I can bring back the memories of what happened like an hour ago, or what happened when I was with these people. And then I can, oh, okay, yeah, I felt like that, or I behaved like that, and I can sometimes make connections with bringing back the memories of the uncomfortable social interaction. Then that's when I can get some self-observation, because I feel I need people to like point it out to me, even if it's just indirect.
Well, so much of what we have in our patterning takes place in relation to others, you know, like if we have a habit of like inflating our accomplishments or something. Yeah, we can do that inside ourselves, but for the most part, we're doing that in relationship with others. That's just an example. So I think it makes total sense that being around people it offers us a mirror, right? To kind of see what we can't see just without a mirror. I mean, I'm thinking in just like a literal sense, but it is certainly helpful. I mean, that's why we talk about working within a group, right? Because it is so much easier to have collaboration in this work than to try to do it alone. And I think that's a reflection of this phenomenon you're talking about, where you notice things when you spend time with people about your own behavior and your thought process. So I think it's good that you're able to do that, and I hope that you're able to, you know, once you get home and you kind of get to reground yourself and as you said, like calm down and relax and process whatever it is, that you're able to do that in such a way that you're having compassion for yourself while you do it without wiggling out of it. They're not the same thing.
Thank you, Noel.
Thank you for sharing, Jonathan.
Well, someone
Alka.
we heard from. Alka, yes. Where are you, Alka?
Do you want me to unmute you? Yeah, I'll ask to unmute. There you go.
There she is.
I like your blue headphones.
Well, these are not blue. There's a story behind it. For me, when I was listening to the lecture today, I was able to find some words because I am working on my cop-outs, as someone recently told me. My cop-out habits, and so one of the reasons I've started coming for these lectures is it's just, I can't even, the word alchemy has become such a personal, beautiful word for me. So today, when I was listening to previous lectures, the way I I'm so sorry because this is very overwhelming for me to listen to all
I
this.
Take your time.
understand that. Yeah, so please do. As Mushtaq says, take your time.
So working on my cop-outs habits, it's so deep that I'm almost not able to believe it myself that I have it. It's like the tiniest voice ever. And with all these alchemy lectures that I'm listening and my one-on-one sessions with Mushtaq, it's phenomenal to be able to hear that. And I always find, Noor, your sharing is so, for me, it's like right on words. For example, you said, there was something you said where you're like, that again, right? You said like, that again. It's still there. All your nonsense is still there. And I think for me, that's all these things are really very helpful. So I am trying to hear these tiniest voices. For me, consciously, it doesn't come natural to me. So for me, these lectures have become almost my go-to place where I get words for what I'm experiencing. So thank you.
Too, for what it's worth. I mean, I have definitely been offered better words to describe my own experience by being in community with others who are sharing their experiences, and it is so nice to be able to collaborate again in that way. So I'm glad that you're finding this helpful like I do as well.
Right. And I find everything so funny. Like somebody said, there's a lot of egotism involved that says you are spiritually refined. Don't do that. I thought that was very funny. You guys are very funny. Yeah, very funny. So,
It's true. We're hilarious.
It's hard work, so the more that we can laugh about it, it takes the edge off a little bit. Yeah.
So thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Alka. Thank you for sharing. And do you want me to mute you again?
Please.
No problem. All right. Yeah, does anyone, I those are the people I wanted to make sure had an opportunity to chime in. Thanks for being brave, but if anybody else has anything to add, feel free. Lavita.
All I was going to say was, it might be time to circle back around and put that link to your new Substack.
No, okay, see,
you did mention it at the beginning of the video.
I did.
That's
See,
all I had.
my ego is squirming and saying, but this is my path is kind of pushing myself out of, not into the spotlight, that's not the goal, but out of my hidey hole that is suffocating me. So thanks, Lavita.
And if it's forgotten, it's noorkylegeorge.substack.com.
Thank you.
Yeah, there will be a link down in the description.
Yeah, I guess
where to find her Substack.
We're gonna make that a default part of our boilerplate so that I can't squirm out of this. Yeah. Shuri.
I was thinking about how honesty comes into play about how you're feeling and how you're expressing yourself. And when you've finally been working by yourself and you realize you need that little push, being able to be in a group and express honestly how you're feeling and how you're progressing, that's really hard. But you recognize, that's what you needed to know, because when you're by yourself, everything's perfect. Doesn't need
terrible.
Well, yeah. But it's kind of like no one's nudging you out of your funk.
Yeah.
So So it could be perfectly funky or just horrible, but you're just staying there all by yourself when you're working by yourself and you're doing all this reading, but no one's actually challenging you to demonstrate. Now put that in action. Really actually put yourself in a position where someone is making you uncomfortable in that way. You think, oh, that's not fair. And yeah, it's not fair. So what are you going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's I being able to have enough presence to know what to do next, how to let yourself get exposed to those raw feelings. It is not an easy thing, but if anybody was wondering about what the answer was, what was doing the feeling, it's having a clear intent whether you're choosing to feel in the little finger or the thumb. So I didn't add that on the end, but if you were wondering, it's all about intention, clear intention. That's it.
Thanks, Sheree.
And if you get really good at that, you can work on feeling both at once.
Yeah, and you can train into that. So
Yeah.
it's just a matter of practice.
Definitely the body and the mind actually can attend to one thing at a time. It's just being able to switch quickly between one or the other. There is feeling in both. One is primary. So you think, oh, right.
There is one other thing that you can do, which is, like they say, you can count 5 leaves on a tree. You can count 5 branches on a tree. You can count 5 trees in a forest, or you can count 5 forests. So yes, you can only attend to one thing at a time. That's brain science. And you can make the sensation between the finger and the thumb the one thing. That's tricky. Takes practice. Everybody's
doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing it and they're going, oh my God. And she didn't tell you that you can begin to do this with each of your fingers, back and forth with both
baby
hands.
steps. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd like to try starting with the little finger and thumb on one hand and the index finger and thumb on the other hand and make them go. And that's very interesting. Even more interesting is moving the finger on one hand and the thumb on the other hand, and then doing it in opposite directions. I haven't gotten there yet, but I know it's possible.
He's working on getting into hard mode. So,
JD has to
Jefferson has to take off.
Jefferson, thank you for coming.
Yeah. All right. James, yeah.
Oh, just Sherry gave me the finger exercise several weeks back. It's incredibly frustrating and I don't enjoy it at all. So I'm trying to keep at it by virtue of that, because I figure it must be the right thing to do. Because it's definitely pushing it's an edge for me.
Yeah.
More so than I realized
everybody's different on that one. She gave it to me too, and I absolutely loved it. It's become my favorite exercise because I can do it anywhere. I can be on an airplane and do it. I can be sitting in a car and do it. I can be walking down the street and doing it, which is really interesting because you have to remember to move your feet at the same time.
Yeah, but I mean, that shows you an edge, right, James? An
Yeah.
edge of discomfort, and
yes,
that's educational in and of itself.
Yes. Yeah. And anytime I get on an edge, it brings out all my automatic reactions. Okay, any excuse to get out of it. Why am I failing at this? Am I a bad person? The whole schmear.
Yeah, that's the spiral that Levito was talking about before.
Yep, and that gets you right into the blaming egoic stuff.
Yes. Yes.
Yep, and again, that's not something to pull into the spiral further, but just to observe and be like,
yeah,
I see you. Yep. Yeah. So Shuri has a response to that, and I think
Yes.
Hind had something to share after that, and then we should probably wrap up.
Yep.
So James, did you try the single leg balancing? Because I found that was the other thing that I've been getting clients to do. And
That's hell to me.
it's
Just trying to, in fact, my balance, I've found, I've had a period of being sedentary through to illness and injury. My balance has gone down quite dramatically, and that's with my eyes open. If I close my eyes, the exercise concludes very quickly.
that's
Yeah.
okay. That is okay. But the part of you that's inside that's fighting it, that's resenting it, is actually that's the goal. That's the thing that you want to work with. And so when I tell people when they're standing there, just lifting one foot and just hovering, nothing fancy, nothing special, and just put it down. And then if you set yourself a timer of 1 minute and you bring your foot up with your eyes closed and you count how many times you drop that foot, and every time you practice, you try and reduce that number. But sometimes it takes a very long time. But incredibly, when you actually go to practice single leg balance with your eyes open, you'll be holding that foot up for a longer period of time, even, you know, to the full minute. It's shocked a few people. Do the hard thing first, count how many times you drop, do the other side, and then give it a rest. And I mean, don't do it again till after lunch or something. But when you do those kinds of things, you have to laugh at yourself. You think, God, I'm a goose. You know, you think, oh, I've actually given myself so many excuses not to do something. And it's the same with work. We find the most amazing, extraordinary amount of excuses not to do the work. And so you have to dive in with that clear intention. I will do this. I will do this at least once today. And you'll actually find a point where you think, this is actually not so bad. And you'll feel muscles in your feet come alive, and your ankles will come alive, and your calf muscles will have tone. You think, check that out. Look at those.
And the thing is that, you know, both of you are having this conversation about a physical activity that brings up a lot of emotional stuff. And it's such a good analogy, metaphor, image, whatever we want to call it, for why this work is challenging, and yet what the benefits can be if we just make peace with being uncomfortable.
And a little aside about the single foot balance exercise, that will actually make you live longer. This is no BS. If you practice your balance, especially like that, especially with your eyes closed, you run the risk of living longer and healthier than if you don't.
I need to tell myself that a lot. I need to really clarify that in my head.
Yeah. That's actually one of the ways that you figure out a person's actual age as opposed to their calendar age, is how long that they can balance on one foot with their eyes closed.
So
I don't want to say anything more about that.
You to start, and that doesn't mean you're stuck there.
Gonna run away now. Run away from the conversation.
All right.
Practice makes it better.
Yes.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and
we should
livening
switch
up
on
the
to
conversation.
Brady Bunch mode. A couple of people already had to take off.
Yeah, Cindy took off. She said, "Gotta go, folks. Thanks so much. Sending love." So we have that.
So we are back.
Brady Bunch mode. This is where we wave to each other and wave to everybody watching on YouTube. And
we'll be back next week if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise.
Take care, everybody. Bye.